Whilst Darryl Preston's team I'd like to welcome Darryl Preston, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and his team to this meeting. And what I'll do before we start, if I may, is just go through one or two housekeeping rules. The first is that if you need to use the facilities through the back doors, the gents is on the far side of the landing, the ladies is on this side. In the event of a fire and there is a continuous alarm, then that means there is a fire, and please use the exit, and we congregate or assemble on the Cathedral Green, which is up towards the cathedral. If there is an intermittent alarm, that means it is a lockdown and you're asked to remain seated until you receive further instruction. Okay? Thank you. So, item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We do, thank you, Chair. We have Claire George, the current Chair at this moment in time, and we have Councillor Butel as well. Thank you. Thank
you, Rachel. Can I just say that Claire's mother is, I believe, terminally ill, so I'm sure you'll join me in sending our very best wishes to her and her family at this time, and this is why you have me here. Councillor Gowing.
Councillor Sharp gives his apologies. He's in a meeting in Cambridge and he hopes to make it later.
Thank you, Councillor Gowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just make a general request to everybody taking part in this meeting? We're in a very echoey room, so please could everybody speak more slowly than they normally would and allow us all to hear what everybody's saying. Imagine you're in King's College Chapel, allowing for the echo. Thank you.
Chance would be a fine thing. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Point made and taken. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosable interest? If so, will you please raise your hand now? Councillor Farkey, you've already declared that you're a defence lawyer, so thank you very much. You're a criminal barrister, that's fine, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of January 2024. Are panel members happy to agree the minutes of the last meeting held on this date? As I don't see any hands raised, it will be signed as an accurate record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to request items 8 and 9 be deferred to the next available meeting when the author, Claire George, is available, please, as she's not able to speak on those matters at this meeting.
Can we just take a vote on that, please, just to confirm that? All those in favour? And that is, I believe, unanimous. Thank you. Item 4, review of actions and recommendations from the previous meeting. Commissioner, do you have anything you wish to report back from the last meeting?
I can't. Chair, normally there are a few questions that I take away, but last one was the preset meeting. The only thing I'd like to do once again is thank the panel for their continued support in relation to that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm double pressing. Yeah, I've dealt with this before. I'm not doing very well. My apologies. Thank you. Have we, Democratic Services, Rachel, have we any questions from the public, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have received 3 questions submitted. There have been 2 questions submitted by Edna Murphy and 1 question submitted by Mr Daniel Fulton. Neither are in attendance this afternoon, so in accordance with 7.15 of the procedure rules, the panel will provide a written response.
Thank you. So in accordance with 7.13 of the Rules of Procedure, they've been published on the website and the panel members sent a copy of the questions on Monday, the 11th of March 2024. The questions will be added to an annex of this meeting's minutes. Item 6. We'll now move to agenda item 6, delivery of the Police and Crime Commissioner's Plan 2021 to 24 Progress Report, pages 70 to 20 of your agenda pack. This item is for discussion only on the progress of the report. Commissioner, will you be kind enough to present your report for me, please?
Chair, thank you. Previously, I've given regular updates in relation to the police and crime plan for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which first came into effect within 6 months of my term of office. And I think as a team, we're proud of that document, and I recall it had a good reception here at this panel. This report for you today is actually ahead of the statutory requirement to produce the annual report. So this isn't the annual report, it's a pre-annual report for want of a better word. So if I may, Chair, I'm just going to go through each part of the plan and just pull out some of the highlights, understanding the panel's had the paper and no doubt have read it and will be some questions. So firstly, and I'll be clear, this wasn't in order. These are all important components of the police and crime plan. But firstly, I'll talk about putting communities first. And this was central to my plan. There'll be many councillors here that speak to residents regularly, as I do. And it was clear that communities wanted their voice heard, the police and other partners to respond to their local issues. So primarily putting communities first, that's what it's about. The other thing we heard time and time again, or I heard, was the requirement for more police officers and more visibility with that as well. I'm pleased to report that here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough we do have record number of officers, currently over 1,732 are in post. Now, quite often we hear, well actually that's just replacing what you lost. And nationally I can't disagree with that. I think we do have more than we did back in 2010, but not significantly more. Here in Cambridgeshire it's a slightly different story. There was a focus on retaining police officer numbers. So, for example, we've got 400 more than in 2015, and this is the most we've ever had. Notwithstanding, we have a growing population, and I'll talk a little bit about funding formula, no doubt, at some part of this meeting. Really pleased that all of our district council and city council areas have taken up the offer of funding around the policy to enhance and support our community safety partnerships. I think it's fair to say that to bring them all on board within 2.5 years was an act of good diplomacy by my team, by partners and other colleagues as well. But what that has resulted in is some really good local problem-solving initiatives, of which we have many examples across the county in each and every one of our component areas. And these will range from sort of youth intervention schemes, some of the high harm stuff, down to fly tipping here in Peterborough, where we've seen a 75% drop in certain areas. through simple local problem-solving techniques. Another example is tackling bicycle theft. And we're talking about putting communities first here. And when this first came to my notice was in Cambridge in particular, the bike capital theft of city in the world, and certainly in this country, it's been number one, along with maybe the City of London for some time. But the issue is, and some people will say, well, it's only a bike, that's not the most serious thing. Well, to some people it is. Bikes can cost a lot of money. They are a form of transport, sometimes the only form of transport. In fact, my son had his bike stolen twice. Interestingly, he wouldn't take it to Cambridge through fear of it stolen, and got it stolen at Ely. But there you go. But there was also a Facebook page in Cambridge who were often saying that the police are doing nothing. We should give them videos, they're doing nothing about this. Now that to me was the most significant problem, because that's trust and confidence in policing. It wasn't just bikes being stolen, it was trust and confidence. Chair, I can report that now we've seen a 52% drop in bike theft across the county. Slightly more in Cambridge, but across the county. And I think that's important. That's completely against national trends. That is as a result of the police and crime plan. I'll move on to crime prevention. I've always said that prevention is better than cure. We've done very well as an office and with partners in securing additional funds. We've currently got the Safer Streets 5 initiative. This has secured around £820,000 of Home Office funding this year, and obviously we've had the other ones before that as well. And this money is going to be targeted at tackling antisocial behaviour and violence against women and girls. I'm particularly proud of a scheme whereby we've been given training to people within the nighttime economy, but not just that, it's gone further. We're going to be rolling out training to bus drivers, taxi drivers, to spot the signs of predatory behaviour. So this isn't about telling women and girls to be safe. This is about spotting predatory behaviour by men. And what we do know as a result of this, because I've had the updates, we know that as a result of this, women and girls, there have been cases where we've managed to, with the result of this training and the support of our partners, stop some hideous and horrible crimes from happening. So it works. I've also continued to fund grassroots work to divert young people away from crime. When we talk about our jobs, some of those things that are most enjoyable is when I have a small fund, but it's not a small fund, actually we spend quite a lot of money, but we've supported 69 projects across the county. And this is the youth fund, which many of you will be aware of. And it does give me some delight to actually hear about the bids that come in and some of the great stuff that's going on right across the county. And I'm particularly proud to be supporting these projects because I reflect that early intervention to me is the key. It's part of a suite of preventative tools, but it is key. You ask any teacher, social worker, police officer, residents, we know quite often which young people are going to end up in the criminal justice system. So why don't we just do something about that? That's the tricky bit. But I know that my fund has supported a number of young people. And moreover than that, we also commission with local authorities and some much bigger programmes of work, putting services into some of the most highly risk vulnerable young people who might end up in the criminal justice system. Work to tackle serious violence is ongoing, and I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. I've seen some statistics recently. I think it's probably going to come up in the brief again, but I've seen some statistics recently which is really pleasing, and I actually mean this. This isn't a sell. Here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, knife crime has gone down by 25%. Now, that means to me something very, very significant when we've seen rises elsewhere in the country. Now, I'd like to take all the credit for that, but I would say that's great work by policing, but actually it's great work by partnerships, by local authority, schools, and others as well. I chair the county-wide High Harms Board, and we brought this in. There was something there before, but frankly, what came before was not effective and not impactful. It seemed to be a meeting for meeting's sake. I got rid of that. And what we did is pull together the right people, and that includes a couple of head teachers, from Peterborough and Cambridge. These are the people who actually know on the ground what's happening. And I think it's fair to say that those people who attend that board, so they will be very senior officers, including from the police, from probation, from the prison service, local authorities, and as I say, probably most importantly, our head teachers, because their insight is quite fascinating. But the feedback I always get that it's a doing board, and I'm pleased that we're moving forward. There are 4 areas that board looks at. Serious violence is one of those. Serious and organised crime is another. But we've also brought in violence against women and girls and drugs. And I am actually the county-wide SRO for the implementation of the drug strategy. And I would say that that's another area we're probably punching above our weight. We've got some fantastic people here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough on the ground delivering some fantastic services. Commissioning support for victims and witnesses is one of my key responsibilities. It's a statutory responsibility. And I'm proud to have committed £10.2 million within my term for services for victims and witnesses. Particularly pleased within that that can cover all crime types and all types of trauma. But we've done really well in securing funding for specialist support for victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. And we've got some anecdotal evidence that that's really, really working. And some of the feedback we're getting from victims who have had that service is really quite positive. The report also contains a number of good news stories which you may be familiar with. One initiative is the Rape Engagement Project, which enabled lifetime feedback to change police processes. So that was quite innovative. And we've recently had a review of our county victim and witness hub. Now, we've always thought it was good on account of that everyone comes to see us to see what we do. But to actually have the data or proof of that, but we've had some sort of external audit, and they've rated us very, very highly with just a couple of recommendations which were well received. I'll move on to ethical policing now, and I think it's not lost on any of us why this is important, and particularly at the moment. We've seen trust and confidence in policing fall. Nationally, we have seen it fall. And I think a lot of that is because of some of these awful, awful incidents that have happened in the past 2 or 3 years. But I'm always of a firm belief as well, trust and confidence is also about the police doing a good job, responding, and dealing with crimes and all that sort of thing. You will know I'm an ex-police officer, and I would demand the highest standards. And I think when we see police officers behaving badly, that impacts me personally as it would impact you, and it impacts the residents. So we need the very highest standards. So I think with ethical policing, what we did do very early on in the term is brought in an independent scrutiny panel, and this scrutiny panel looks at the police use of stop and search and use of force. And this is a broad spectrum of people, volunteers, so I'm very grateful for them. And the result of their work, and the constabulary, to be fair, have been very supportive of this process as well. We've received some really great feedback from this scrutiny panel, which has changed processes within policing to ensure that we've got the very best standards when it comes to those uses of force. Moving on to the last area was around robust enforcement. I mean, ultimately, when all else fails, and I've talked about prevention being the key, when all else fails, we would expect our police to use their powers lawfully, appropriately, and bring people to justice. So reducing crime has got to be a priority. I am pleased to report that neighbourhood crime is down by 24%. Neighbourhood crime includes the abhorrent crime of household burglary, which is actually down by 37% across the county, and so it should be. It's an awful crime. Rural crime down is significantly by 21%. And coming back to the putting communities first bit, hair coursing, which obviously won't impact people here in Peterborough city areas or town areas so much, but did have a massive impact on our rural communities. Anybody that works or resides in those rural communities will be aware, but hair coursing has actually gone down by, I think it was 73% across the county. Now that's a mixture with new legislation. We've got the best rural crime team in the country, and I'm happy to go on record for that, and a number of other initiatives working with Countryside Watch, the NFU and others. And I've also mentioned that the serious offences involving a sharp weapon are down by 26%, with hospital admissions, which is actually the main thing to look at, because as you can imagine, quite a lot of people who get involved with knife crime don't report this to the police, but they will go to hospital if they're seriously injured. So that's the measure. It's around hospital admissions, and the latest figures show we've got a 56% drop. I'll get kicked or nudged if that isn't correct, but a 56% drop in hospital admissions. I think there's some question around the data, but either way, I think that's worth noting and is good news. I'm very much aware, and I'm sure many of you will be able to point out other areas that may have gone up, and I will not rest on my laurels. There is more to be done, and I think we would all agree with that. Perhaps just a couple of things. I'm often asked, obviously your role is to challenge and support. I know one of those pre-asked questions was around fraud, which I could talk about for a long, long time. I used to be a senior policy officer representing PCCs on this very topic. But we have an Eastern Cyber Resilience Centre, which is a police team funded by police and crime commissioners, and they're really, really good. And they're there to support businesses for fraud and cyber crime. We have struggled. We've tried to put on events, and we've done a couple that have been reasonably successful, but struggled to get through to businesses that this is a free service out there. I'm often told by people when we talk about fraud, well, where do we go? Where do we get the advice? Which one is the right advice? Well, this is law enforcement. So if you can, within your area, if you as councillors and within parish council meetings, any way you can get this out, it's a free service, and we'll get you the details for it. I think, Chair, there's an awful lot more I could go on. I think we've talked about a number of things within the paper. I just want to mention one last thing, which is road safety. Often people will see this as speeding. I'm very keen to point out it's not speeding is the issue, it's the impacts and effects of that. So this is about road safety. We have seen, and this is unverified because apparently it hasn't been verified since COVID, but we have seen a fall in serious injuries and fatalities as reported by the constabulary over the past 3 years. We still need to do more as a partnership, and that's not just policing, because too many people are injured or die on our roads. So that's an area that I would still want to focus on. Chair, there's much more I could say. I think I will leave it there, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. No, I agree with you. There's nothing wrong in speeding. It's speeding in the wrong place that causes the problem. This is, truth be told. Questions from the panel, if I may, please. Councillor Bradnam.
Right, I'm going to bring this over this side. Forgive me, I didn't hear everything that you said, Commissioner, I'm sorry, but the acoustics in this room are very difficult. So 2 things I want to ask you. One is on page 14, when you're talking about support through the criminal justice process. I would like to know to what degree you are able to support victims of crime, and particularly of rape and sexual assault, many of whom are unfamiliar with the court and the legal process, many of whom would be feeling very vulnerable and on their own, many of whom are feeling extremely distraught by the experience that they've gone through. They might be supporting children as well. And I would like to know, with some granular detail if you can, to what degree police officers keep in touch with those victims to let them know what they need to be prepared for next in the legal process, what steps will happen, who they can speak to, who they can contact if they want advice about how it should proceed next, and also as it goes through the legal process, how they can contact the court and find out what the decision has been. So that's my first question, and I'd rather hear your answer on that one before I go to my second, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a great question, because that's really, really important, and the support. Now, I will give a very brief summary. You asked for granular detail. I will then hand over to Nikki, who I know could talk all day and then some on this very subject, because it's really, really important.
Chair, point of order. Could you ask the PCC to speak a bit slowly and close to the microphone? I'm struggling to hear.
I'm sorry, the acoustics are appalling. I think sometimes it's the tenor of your voice, so, you know, there is a volume control if you think you're booming or whatever, but I'll leave that to you. Your dulcet tones are... Unfortunately, we need to have you for the live stream. Sorry. Perhaps Darryl, maybe just go back a little bit from the mic and see if that works. Work it. You can do this, Darryl.
I can speak loudly, that's not... Right, okay, I'll speak loudly. So, okay, I'll just go back. So I will hand over to Nikki, who does have the absolute minutiae and all the detail around this. But just a couple of points on this. Firstly, there is a victims code. The Constabulary have a specialist rape investigation team dealing with sexual offences and child abuse investigation teams, and I've visited them, and I know that there's significant work they do with victims and witnesses. But I also mentioned the independent sexual support advisors that we have as well, and they will follow people through a court case. So you've obviously got a police sort of support, but you've also got those extra funded posts that do that as well. I think it's also, and I will hand over to you, it's also important to note though that we commission services that don't just deal with those that report to the police, because quite a lot of people, unfortunately, but it's a personal choice, don't report to the police, but they will go to the Rape Crisis Centre or Women's Aid, etc. So we're very conscious of that, make sure and ensure that they too get the appropriate support and services. What I would say, and it's still very disappointing, is that we see Crown Court backlogs. I have been on so many meetings with the Ministry of Justice, and I chair our local criminal justice board. There are a number of reasons around that. I know from a legal profession, one of it is just a lack of barristers. But this needs dealing with, because what we can't have is victims of serious crimes, particularly sexual offences, waiting sometimes years to have their day in court. And I do know of some cases where people will drop out because it's just taken too long, and that is shocking. But some where they have managed to stay in because they've had that real specialist support as well. Nikki, shall I? I'll ask you to summarise your response, please.
No.
Yes. Is it on now? Is that better? Brilliant, thank you. Some of what I'm going to say is going to duplicate a little bit of what the Commissioner is going to say, because obviously what I want to do is describe a journey through the criminal justice system for you. So when a victim reports, for example, a sexual offence such as a rape, to the police, they'll be allocated what's called a specially trained officer. They're called STOs. These work in our rape investigation team. They'll also be referred to our ISVA service, which is run by our county-wide rape and sexual violence support service. That's Cambridge Rape Crisis, working in partnership with Peterborough. We've got a memorandum of understanding, and we're one of the only areas in the country that have this, of how this ISVA works in partnership with the STO in the rape investigation team to ensure that survivors are getting the updates when they want them and when they need them. So what happens is there's communication between the ISVA and the STO to make sure any updates at key points through the criminal justice process the updates are given to the victim and survivor in a way that they want them to be. So if they have a preference to be delivered messages face-to-face, it'll be done face-to-face. If they want their messages delivered by the ISVA, it'll be through the ISVA rather than the officer. So all the way through, it's all linked about personal choice. What's really good as well is our Victim and Witness Hub we mentioned earlier that's just been reviewed. Because it's a joined-up unit with witness care and a victim support provider, they're getting any updates from other agencies like CPS and from courts. They're getting early notification of where court dates might be listed. And they will also liaise with the ISVA to ensure those updates are provided to the victim in the way that meets their needs. Obviously, the Victims Code of Practice that we've referred to as well gives victims 12 entitlements through their criminal justice journey, and that's 12 points where they're entitled to be updated by certain agencies. Interestingly, that code is going to be enshrined in law if the Victim and Prisoners Bill, which is currently going through the House, actually makes it through. And also that bill gives police and crime commissioners a responsibility to monitor other agencies' compliance with the code, because this isn't just about updates coming from policing, this is about updates coming from the courts, this is about updates coming from CPS, and police and crime commissioners will be given that responsibility to ensure that those agencies are giving the updates to victims in accordance with what's set out in the code. So it's the end-to-end process is quite long with lots and lots of people dipping in and out, but if the bill goes through, a PCC's office will have an overview of all of that journey.
Very much.
Going off. Sorry. You have a supplementary question.
I did, yes. This is relating to my first question. I have a second, but what I'm really keen to ensure is that since the police are, if a woman has been abused or raped or suffered sexual assault, and she summons up the courage to actually go to the police, because you'll appreciate it's not so straightforward or clear-cut as it used to be since the events of Sarah Everard and that sort of thing. What I'm hoping that the police service actually thinks of the woman as a whole person and is in the business of navigating her to other sources of support as well. Because what's so difficult is when people take that step to report and then feel that they're not fully supported. They feel that, something might happen, but then the ball is dropped somewhere else. So are we giving them emotional support as well? Are we navigating them to other sources of emotional support?
I'll master this. So the independent sexual violence advisors, which actually are going to be enshrined in law as opposed through the Victim and Prisoners Bill as well, their role is actually as an advocate. So they will provide advocacy through lots of other agencies. So if there's any housing needs, they'll liaise with housing. If they have any finance needs, if they want any help with particularly children in schools, etc., they'll help navigate through all that system. But they also provide that emotional support, and our 2 rape crisis centres provide a number of sessions when somebody comes first into the system. They will offer some sessions which enable them to stabilise, to really understand what they've been going through, and so that emotional support is really specialist. Sadly, at the moment, the funding for therapeutic services is quite limited, but where we do have opportunities to bid for extra funding, we do that as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. May I go on to my second question? Thank you. Thank you for that. The second question I wanted to ask, you mentioned about road safety and speed. You'll know very well how concerned I am about that in my own division. And you mentioned there has been a drop in fatalities. What I'm concerned about is the number of accidents, road collisions, road incidents that do not actually cause a fatality, but indicate a location of danger. And I'm just wondering, are you doing anything to record accidents or road traffic accidents which do not cause a fatality but might cause injury, or that might cause a recognition that a particular location is prone to a particular kind of incident, you know, even if it doesn't cause an actual fatality?
So I think the straightforward answer to that is yes. It is yes, those are and causal factors as well. You know, I won't sit on the fence here. I mean, a lot of this will be other agencies will have primacy in. But we can't just say that. We need to come together, and that's why we have the Vision Zero partnership within the county, where all the relevant agencies who have some stakeholders in this area work together. But the answer is yes. All that information, and I've seen lots and lots of information, and a lot of that is collected by the Department for Transport as well. And then decisions have to be made as to, you know, where those priorities are. And it will often be around, I think it's KSI is the figure they use more often than not, around injuries and fatalities. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, a near miss as well is also one that needs to be recorded. So I know that information is recorded. We can have a look to see if there's something I can give you at some stage out of this meeting just to confirm that. I just wanted to make one point, Chair, just going back to the sexual offences. Forgive me. Sometimes the question's got to be, so what, is it working? A statistic that my team did bring together is that Cambridgeshire consistently recorded the lowest percentage of investigations closed because the victim did not support action, and that was ranging between 36% and 42%, which may or may not be a great figure because people have their own reasons for withdrawing, but the national rate is 51 to 76%, so the constabulary and partners must be doing something right. And it would be remiss of me not to actually say, you mentioned STOWs, the specially trained officers. I just recall, I'll just throw this in, I think I was one of the very first specially trained officers here in Cambridgeshire to deal with sex offences of the male gender. So I was quite proud to be doing that at the time.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, please. So I was looking at the report and really welcoming the fact that we've had such good recruitment statistics. But I wanted to ask about the next step along from that, which is retention. What are the biggest challenges that you face in terms of officer retention, and what are the things that you're doing to support your officers and to keep retention?
So, I mean, that's operational for the Chief Constable, but clearly one that I hold to account for. Look, I haven't got those figures in front of me, but we regularly look at them, and my understanding is, and Jim he's on those meetings as well, here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, our retention is good and above the sort of national average. So I think the constabulary are doing a good job at keeping its staff. What I do know is that policing, particularly here in Cambridgeshire, far exceed many other public sector organisations in retention of staff as well. And the Chief Constable could talk for a very long time. He has a culture statement embedded in the organisation. I think we're the only constabulary force in the country to have that. And it's not just a piece of paper, that's reflected and regarded to in every policy, in everything the police do. And there are a number of other things that they're doing as well, but probably one of the best indicators that it's a good organisation to work for is that obviously we're still recruiting significant amounts of police officers. We talked about national uplift, talked about that recruitment. Well, actually, that has to go on. We have to maintain those numbers, so there is still significant recruitment. I'm told that we have a really healthy pipeline. We have hundreds and hundreds of good people of the required standard applying to join the police. Here in Cambridgeshire, that's not the same elsewhere. So that must say something for how the Chief Constable is running his organisation.
Thank you. My second question is about something different. So it's on page 18. It's related to the serious and organised crime section of your report. The last sentence in there, you speak about anti-slavery partnerships and work that's done in response to modern slavery and human trafficking. Is there anything you could expand on that? I understand it might not be something that you want to talk in detail about if it's operationally sensitive, but who are the sorts of organisations that you are working in partnership, and what does that work involve?
So we have the Modern Day Slavery Network, which is a national body which I would remember with as well. So locally there's been lots of work strategically and tactically in relation to this. Now the partners being worked with are probably some of those that you can imagine. There will be sort of local authorities, there'll be community groups. We actually have a dedicated team here in Cambridgeshire, and I met with them recently, and obviously a lot of that is operational as to what they do. But what my office actually is fund a post, so we were talking about that victims post. Nikki, you could perhaps talk a bit more about that, but we know that person who is from an Eastern European background has done some fantastic work in that's like with sexual offences, probably even more difficult to keep people on board with the criminal justice system. There's also been some really good successes in this county. I will be careful now because I'm not sure what is in the public domain, but there has been some really good successes, and I think we actually saw one of the 24 hours in police custody was around a modern day slavery case as well. Chair, may I bring Nikki in to see if or indeed Christina maybe to see if there's any more that they could add?
Yeah, so the Commissioner funds 2 posts in our Victim and Witness Hub, which we mentioned earlier. One's Romanian speaking and one's Lithuanian speaking. So what their job is to do outreach work in the communities, to accompany police officers when they're doing visits to houses of multiple occupancy or visits to businesses, and to actually take a really victim-focused approach at approaching people and having conversations with them and offering support, and also having conversations often in their first language, because they may not even know they're victims or being exploited, they may not have realised. So it's actually working with these victims and offering support. And actually they will then stay with them even if they go into the national referral mechanism and potentially are rehoused out of area for their own safety. Our workers will stay in contact with them through the entire time up until the trial, and then there'll be that familiar person at the trial with them as well, which has proven to be something. It means these people remain engaged with the criminal justice process, and we've had some really successful convictions through trafficking related offences recently.
Councillor Tyler. Councillor Lehman, are you consent? Yes, thank you. Councillor Tyler, please.
I tend to make a mess. Oh, it's working. Yeah, just going back to the recruitment really. I've found there seems to be a disconnect between the police and the local councillors, and it's not because it's intentional, it's not because anybody's purposely leaving somebody else out of the loop. It just seems to be there's no stable officers on the ground, and you get into a relationship with somebody, 3 months later they've gone, so you have to start again from afresh to sort of regenerate that relationship, or to restart that relationship again with somebody new. And it's just frustrating because you're on the back foot again, rather than being in advance of things or knowing what's going on. And I just think, why do we keep shuffling our officers around the way that we do when you're just starting to get a relationship going? I'm sorry about my sore throat.
And that's an issue I hear quite frequently. I mean, the deployment of officers is a matter for the Chief Constable. We probably all recognise that, like any profession, people will move around. I think we've seen, with the uplift in numbers, and let's be really clear, these are officers young in service, but young in service and in training, a lot of them. So we won't see them really being effective for a while. That's the reality of it. But it's a nice problem to have. The Chief Constable has made commitments around local policing. And frankly, you know, whatever government we are looking to next time, I think this is going to be a key policy area, local policing and visibility. And so hopefully there'll be funding behind that as well. So I think wherever we move, there is a drive, because I think we would all accept that there is a requirement for the police to deal with the most high harm and high risk types of offences. We understand that. In fact, I saw a statistic yesterday from a very eminent professor. And quite often, and as councillors, you'll talk to your local residents and you'll hear about local concerns, and they're all important. They're all important. But when you ask a more wide range of people what your concerns are, it was interesting. They said what they wanted the police to deal with and prioritise. They said murder, they said rape, and they said those things. That's what the public want the police to prioritise, and that's a completely independent, proper sort of poll. And I think all of us would agree with that as well. But I think what's happened is, and I'm not alone, there will be other people out there who would say the same thing, over the past 10, 20, probably even more years, the police have focused so much on that local policing, that local trust and confidence has been lost. And I think that's an issue that's been recognised now. The Chief Constable has made commitments around local policing, has actually said about keeping people in post longer. What we have seen, what I have been informed by the Chief Constable, is that lots of our officers are applying to go into local policing. Now, they're actually applying to go into it. I won't, anybody who's an ex-police officer, and I've got a couple with me here today, it used to have some very good community police officers, but they were obviously end of career, weren't going to do nights, so that was the job for them. Now it's quite different. We've got some really young, enthusiastic people wanting to get out there and do local policing. So I hear what you're saying. I think it will get better, but people will always move around.
Just to add to that, excuse me, I've got residents, excuse me, as we all have, that are struggling with mental health problems because of either the fear of crime or because of the reality of crime, thank you. And, we as counsellors, or I personally as a counsellor, I try to do my best, but I'm no expert in addressing people's mental health problems. And, a lot of that does come from either the reality of violence or the reality of crime and social behaviour and the rest of it. How do we help all those people as well, because all they want to do is they just want to see the problem fixed. And there are times when we don't.
If this is a result of crime or fear of crime, if it's crime, then report the crime, and then the other services can be brought in. I actually fund, I don't know how many, someone will remind me, but we fund mental health nurses to work in our control room. I will speak up.
Down. Just lift your mic up a bit, save you ducking down.
I actually fund mental health nurses in our control room. To some extent, that is quite annoying because, actually what people want are more police officers up and down their streets, not me spending it on mental health nurses, but actually it's a good investment because the phraseology is it reduces demand. In other words, they can support the police who are dealing with people with mental health crisis. So although that doesn't directly answer, we're very alive to this. I will mention here as well the right care, right person. You might have seen this nationally. It's a policy that is now being driven out by government, having been piloted in Humberside Police. And there was a couple of horror stories around it. So for those that don't know, this is about taking away perhaps some of those things that the police shouldn't be doing away from them and giving it to the agencies that should be doing or best placed to do. The police have long been, always been, the emergency service of last resort. If no one else deals with it, the police will. And in fact, I was told this by one of our mental health nurses, that during times of recession and hardship, some of the utility companies, talking to customers who couldn't pay bills, were phoning the police to say that their customer had been threatening, suicide or mental. They were phoning the police, not an ambulance, not doctors, but they phone the police because they know the police won't ignore it. But that's not right, and it's not right for that person suffering a mental health crisis. I remember in the police where we used to drag people in suffering a mental health crisis and put them in police cells because there was nowhere else. I'd like to think that I did it in the most compassionate way possible, but that is not right, because these people are dealing with a health issue and need appropriate health care. Now that's what this policy is about. We're not going down the lines of maybe commissioners or other chief constables who said we're just going to stop doing it. The constabulary are working very, very closely with partners. So, for example, to move to that position, there is a police car that goes around with a mental health worker and a police officer responding to incidents. Actually, is it the police's job? But this is about people and looking after people. But we need to make sure that the right agencies are dealing with these problems, because I suspect, Brian, that actually that's probably a lack of healthcare provision as much as anything.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Councillor Varkey.
In page number 17, you have mentioned a significant reduction of crime, like, for example, bicycle theft is down by 52%. Where does it actually effectively taking place? Like, is it in Cambridge down or Peterborough it is down? Is it possible to provide us a little bit of breakdown as to where is actually taking the real effect or impact? Thank you.
52% of the game is enforced-wide areas, so that's Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We do have a breakdown, it's actually better than that in Cambridge, but I don't want to disadvantage my great colleagues from Peterborough, etc., because 52% I would take as well. But yeah, I'm sure we can find that, certainly for Cambridge, from the patch.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions before we ask Councillor Barkham?
Chair, I have 5 points that I wanted to put to the team. 5 brief points, if you permit it. Thank you. Hey team, thank you for coming. Really good to hear about your attitudes to prevention, because I think that is actually key. Rather than treating symptoms, you're at the cause. So, the first point was the road safety. And I wonder if you could help, actually, because the scenario recurs with regards to the requirement of traffic calming measures. However, at that point or location, there hasn't yet been a fatality. So we're trying to prevent these scenarios from occurring. And you get lots of reports from residents indicating road usage is dangerous. So, and there's a lot of near misses, but no fatalities yet. So to prevent that from happening, rather than waiting for it to happen and then in turn reacting, can you help with that scenario? Do you want to come back to these independently? Shall I give them all together and then you come back at the end, or do you want to come back to them each time?
Hopefully I heard you, because I had the echo problem there as well. But there was a bit about cameras in locations where maybe they aren't best suited. I mean, camera locations, my understanding, I think that's highways that are actually dealing with that. But that is in consultation with...
I didn't mention cameras. It was difficult to hear me then. Turn it down. Traffic calming measures. Right, okay. At near miss spots, but no fatalities yet.
Engineering. So I believe that the police are consulted, but they're not the primacy agency. But once again, what we don't want to do is say it's your problem, it's your problem. I mean, there is a process, and as councillors you'll probably know far more about it than I do, applying for sort of funds in relation to road calming. It's not one I've heard some complaints about different kinds of road calming, including the speed humps and barriers. But then again, I hear lots of complaints about speeding, and we need road calming. I think there's a real requirement, certainly, to consult with local parish councils or town councils as well, because it's local people know their patch best, and can often, although there's a scientific answer, there's also a little bit about talking to local people as to what would work here. I mean, I see now we're seeing lots more 20-mile-an-hour zone limits across the county, so obviously there's a bit of policy change there. I'm a firm believer that where it's appropriate, 20 mile an hour is appropriate, but I don't think that's everywhere, and I don't think the evidence supports that as well. What I would encourage, though, is this, because speeding and road safety is a constant wherever I go. I've invested in the constabulary in enforcement. So we do have a squad of police officers who go out and do enforcement in our special constabulary, actually. But once again, that's not the answer. Ultimately, I've always said with this type of thing, with speeding, it's probably like some of those other things like drink driving, etc. We've got to make it morally unacceptable to people, to young people first, because they will be they start driving. That actually speeding's not cool, it's not clever. And often, ends in very serious or fatal injury, and that's not just aimed at young people. I would also encourage, community action as well, and the community speed watch, which we have many volunteers across the county who do a great job. Does it work? Well, I'd slow down if I see one. Of course, I always drive within the speed limit, but also they can then feed into the constabulary and other partners with information, and then more dedicated enforcement happens as well. I really wish I had all the answers when it came to this. I don't, and it's an area that I'm always prepared to listen to and be innovative on with partners.
Thank you. It's just that the present system is failing because it waits for something to happen rather than preventing it. That's what we're up against. The second point was on the rural crime and bike crime. Colleague did touch on it. It was just a case of having the numbers separated, if we could, for Cambridge, Peterborough, for example. It's just a percentage for the whole county. If it's possible to break it down. That was all. The constabulary accessibility, there's a comment with regards to a new telephony system at the demand hub. Can you expand on that? So why that would improve the scenario, for example, with the demand coming through 999 rather than 101, for example? How would that help with that?
Thank you. We'll get back to you on the breakdown. Some of it might be easy, some of it might be very difficult. So we'll just get back down if we can do that. Yeah, the telephony. Well, the telephony system we've got now is old and end of life. The issue that's been described to me is actually being able to retrieve some of the data which would drive better processes. So I've talked about this time and time again. 101, it can be clunky. We've got some great people working in there, but it can be a bit clunky. And to really understand the data, we need a modern system which is giving us that data. So at what point are people dropping off? After how long? So this has been scheduled now. There's contractual reasons, but I think it's next year. It was this year. Sorry, it's this year. Yeah, in the paper. This year that we're now looking at getting this new system in, which I'm sure will provide a better service to the public.
Thank you. Yeah, makes sense. Public contact. There's a reference to dissatisfaction on the service, and 149 in brackets. Is that 149 instances or complaints of dissatisfaction with the constabulary? Do you want a reference for where that is, or give me a moment? It's under public contact, which is page 11. So, where there's the correspondence that you receive, 547 pieces of correspondence, and then of these frequently recurring issues include dissatisfaction with the constabulary, 149. Just to expand on what those recurring instances of dissatisfaction are.
Microphone test for me. So that's correspondence into the PCC's office, and to be fair, that covers the entire range of dissatisfaction. So typically the way that we would deal with it, depending on what it is, the majority of those would be logged by us but then sent to the constabulary's dissatisfaction team, because they have a specific team of people that if you write into the constabulary and say, I'm not happy with how my burglary was investigated, or I'm not happy with, initially it goes to that team to see if they can resolve the issue very quickly. If it needs longer, then it will then get dealt with almost as a complaint, but that sort of process. And if the person's still not happy, then it gets formally recorded as a complaint and handled by professional standards. So that 149 cases that we've got there will represent a vast range of different things in terms of that. It might be about an individual officer, it might be about a policy, it might be about opening hours of an inquiry station. It basically it covers the full range. Jack, who is, I think, sitting on the end there, so his team will look at that correspondence coming into us to see if there are any themes in that correspondence, because we have other specific roles in the complaint handling by the constabulary. So we look to see if there's any themes that is coming into our inbox that is also reflected anywhere else in the material that we have with the constabulary, so that we can start digging to see whether there's a problem. The difficulty we have, these are very small numbers compared to the tens, hundreds of thousands of incidents that the constabulary deal with. So we sort of take a measured approach to say, first of all, is this truly replicative of a problem? So we've had 4 complaints about something. Is it just that the constabulary has only had 4 as well, and we just happen to also be included? Or does that then represent 400 that the constabulary are dealing with that we don't know about, in which case we would then take further action to scrutinise it?
Okay, thank you.
Is that point 4?
Yes, final point, brief as I can. Just regards to serious and organised crime, there's a note that Peterborough is an early adopter. What does that mean? What are they adopting, please?
Just making sure I got that one right as well. So this is the government pilot for a clear hold build. And there's been some significant work done here in Peterborough, particularly around the Lincoln Road area, I believe, as well, with some investment as well from government. I think I'll let others speak to it who will know the details more. I have been to a couple of the briefing sessions on this recently. But I think it's as is on the tin, really, and I think originally it's probably come from the United States and some sort of process and methodology there, and that's seen by our violence reduction units across the country. But it's a partnership approach of continued services and inputs into that very localised area. So this wouldn't be Peterborough, this would be an area in Peterborough where you would get specific services put in. There would be some intense police activity as well, but then you don't just walk away from it, because that's the problem will just come back. I don't know, Christine, if you would add more to it than that, but in essence, that's it. It's happening here. I think we're seeing some pretty good outcomes already, but I wouldn't want to give any of that away because I don't have the details at hand.
It's been renamed as Alliance now, and it's Inspector Milcreast who's in charge of it, if you need any further details. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Tyler.
Drones, the future. Do we use them? Do we use them well? Will we use them? Would the police, as a service, be happy to make better use or more use of drones?
That's an interesting question which causes some national debate. Do we use them here in Cambridgeshire? Yes. Am I going to tell you how we use them? No. but they are used to good effect, and we have made some significant investments. One of the issues currently with drones is that they can only be used in line of sight other than for military purposes. There have been some conversations with the Civil Aviation Authority that this is the future. We will move to that. That I have no doubt. The wider issue is that that the police helicopter, when you see it, it used to be that each police force had its own helicopter, which was a bit of a nuisance because they're really expensive and they break down. We now have the National Police Air Service. But I think we've got to get away from helicopters and things. It's actually about the requirement. What is it we need these things to do, and then get the right kit to do it. I've absolutely no doubt that the future of unpersoned air vehicles is the way forward. But a lot of that is actually down to the bureaucracy and the legal requirements around who can fly these things. But at the moment, those discussions are going. The policing minister is all over this issue around drones at the moment, so that is moving things in Whitehall in the right direction. You may have also seen drones as first response. I think that was in the budget. I'm not sure where that would be deployed. I've heard this, and lots of people have talked about this in relation to reducing police time at certain things. But we will see. But this is the future of the aviation sector and policing.
Part of my ward is being plagued by quad bikes and motorcycles and illegal motorcycles, and they're everywhere. They're ubiquitous, and there's sort of no stopping them because the police can't react in time to catching these. And in the back of my head, I have this vision of a drone catching being on site more or less straight away. And, if we can find out who these people are, we can sort of bring them to, face the cause, if you like, but however fast the police car is, the drone is always going to be quicker, and I would assume, and I would have thought it'd be on the site of where these crazy drivers are hiding away and doing whatever they do. So.
I think it comes back to my point that I think drones will play a bigger part going forward. Just on that point of immunity if you're on a bike, moped or scooter, that's not the case. The police do have tactics. I know it won't be deployed all the time, but the police have their own scramble bikes and drones and other tactics that they will use in those, but it's not everywhere all the time.
Thank you. Any further questions for the Commissioner? In which case, just before we note the contents of the report, just like to draw your attention to page 16. At the end of 2023, Cambridgeshire's scheme for the independent custody visiting scheme achieved gold for the first time. So I don't know how much part you played in it in your team, but congratulations to the Chief Con if that's appropriate.
I mean, if I may, Chair, it was very much my team that drives that. Jack being one of them and shown him my office do some fantastic work, but I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying it's actually our volunteers who go out there. They do this for nothing, and they do a fantastic job visiting our custody cells, ensuring, it's not just ensuring actually that those in custody are appropriately cared for, it's ensuring that the police officers and staff are also being appropriately cared for as well. So it was really pleasing to see that.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I ask members to note the contents of the report? Thank you for some healthy questions. Thank you. Okay, item 7, report of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Will we now move to item 7, pages 21 to 26. The panel is recommended to note the contents of the report. Yep. Okay. Commissioner, you and your team are now free to go. Thank you very much indeed for your time and input.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panel. Thank you.
By all means.
Thanks for coming. Is there anything that we've put to you tonight that the panel could help you with, for example? Is there anything we could do to tackle any of these challenges as well, since we are a team?
So, thank you, and that's actually not a question, but a really good point as well. I think I mentioned a couple of things which are sort of the tactical bits. So there are lots of services and provisions available to residents and businesses. Like us all, sometimes it's difficult to have that reach. You know, the police and my office will have a certain reach. So anything you can do to, I mentioned the Eastern Region Cyber Resilience Centre, to promote that, because particularly as councillors, you'll know many businesses, etc., in your area, as well as local residents as well. The other thing I would say, and I constantly say, is the report. You know, when people are telling us things aren't happening, we don't see the police, this is happening, the amount of times that we will then go back and actually find there's been very few reports. And I do understand quite often that is because people think nothing will happen, but data is you know, really important around this as well. And I think what I would say is that within this term, I feel that I have been appropriately challenged and supported by this panel. So I am more than happy to come to you on an ad hoc, which I think we did with the survey, for example. Some of you, a couple in particular, have really good reach on social media. You know, push out the survey, because this is for the good of the public and all those sort of things. And your continued support in that is really helpful. But we'll certainly I will give that more thought as well, because there's, you know, the more the merrier in our task to keep our communities safe.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for your time with us today, Commissioner. Two things. One is, absolutely, I urge my residents to report, but it's rather disappointing when they report and then nobody comes. I've had 2 cases recently where people reported burglaries and no police officer turned up, which was disappointing and upsetting for them. But the second question is that just in today's paper, we've got the record that Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Service was published on the 12th of March, and I'd like to ask that we bring that to our next agenda so that we have time to formulate questions on the basis of it, and you have an opportunity to formulate responses. Thank you.
On the burglary question, I'd be interested. One of the problems with burglary, because of the type of crime it is, you get a distinction. So a shed burglary or a warehouse burglary is still a burglary, and it's still a crime, and it's still impactive. But then you have household burglary, which I would argue, having been a victim, is really impactive. That's that personal space. Now, the commitment from this constabulary is to attend every household burglary. So, Councillor, if you could come back to me, if that's household burglaries, I suspect it probably isn't. It might have been, if that is household burglaries, then please do come back to me, because I'd be very disappointed. I suspect that they may not be, but if that is the case, I'd be disappointed, because the Chief Constable is committed. There may be a very few exceptions if someone's been on holiday for a year, but the Chief Constable is committed to attend, and I'll take your second point away there as well.
You content with that, Councillor Bradnam? Yep. Okay, thank you. Jim, you wanted to come back in on the previous point, I do believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on that previous point, the paper that you just noted on in terms of the serious violence duty, that was around the discussion at the end of the last panel meeting concerning what the panel can do to support. because, and so we've prepared that paper for you to explain the duty, because now every local authority has got a duty to consider the impact of its decisions and policies on serious violence in the area. You already have an existing duty to consider crime and disorder reduction and the impact of your policies and decisions. Now, this is not just for your sort of community safety committees or your CSPs, your community safety partnerships. This is every meeting, every committee meeting, whether it be on youth services, education, highways, budget, as well as the community safety, so that the decisions that you're making in terms of your business as a local authority, you should always be considering that, just as you would do things like equality impact assessments. These things are supposed to be weaved in to your sort of business. So that was the purpose of that paper on the serious violence duty that Christina has produced, just to give you a bigger explanation of what that is around, to help you with that, taking it back into your organisations.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody want to pick up on that? There was a point made and taken. And at that point, Commissioner and your team, thank you very much for your attendance today and your input, and safe travels. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, item 10, discussion items for 2024-25. I would suggest Councillor Bradnan would like to start that.
Thank you. Thank you. I felt it was only fair to give the Commissioner a heads up. So this has just been His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Service for Cambridgeshire was published on the 12th of March, briefly written up in Cambridge News, which I happened to see this morning over my breakfast. So I'd like for us to bring a paper on that to the next panel, so we can consider the views, because actually it's not all rosy. Some of it, the things that we know about, the things that have been mentioned, Councillor Barham referred to it, the poor response rate at the demand hub and the difficulty of access to that came up in this report. So I think we might want to take the Police and Crime Commissioner to account on that.
I think that's quite a reasonable point to bring up. Bear in mind, obviously, what may be is that might be part of, if we have the same commissioner or a different commissioner, because the next time we meet, of course, the elections will have taken place. That's your proposal. Do we have a seconder for it, please? Councillor Ferguson, thank you very much indeed. So that will be an item for discussion at the next meeting, and it may be something that we need to review on a regular basis. Anything else that members would like to put on the agenda? Councillor Ferguson.
Not so much about the agenda, but it's about the venue of this meeting. I found today's experience deeply uncomfortable because of the acoustics, and I would hope that we can find a better venue for next meeting, because lots of us come from quite a long way to get here and dedicate a lot of our time, and it's been very difficult to participate in this meeting because of the acoustics.
All I can do is apologise to you, because I've just walked into 2 meetings today thinking they were in the boardroom and we were here, and there's been meetings all week, so we've been under pressure here, and we do apologise on behalf of the council. We'll be back in the boardroom for the next meeting in July, which I think you have any other items for discussion, just for whoever quick look at the dates so that...
As a point of order, if you look at the agenda pack on the list of members and is completely many years out of date as well, so
yes,
it'd be helpful
and
to correct that.
It has been noted, And
I
one of
raised,
the reasons
I raised that to your attention
one,
as soon as
one
the
of the
papers came.
reasons in the pre-meet was you shouldn't need to have seen the green and the yellows. They should have been done. It was an administrative error and it's been corrected. So, or it will, whatever's hung over will be corrected. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Ask that when that paper does come to us, that it's absolutely clear what is the proposed addition, and if it might be easier to do it in like word review, where you can say additional text is in red, text to be deleted is, you know, struck through, something like that, so we can see what proposals for change, what changes have been proposed in the context of the document. I'm also slightly astonished to read that, you know, the last, what was it, from page 35 to page 60 of our agenda were the rules of procedure. It's a very long document, and I'm slightly astonished that it's so long. That's not a criticism of anybody. I'm just thinking, crikey, that is a very long document for a body that, you know, has limited powers, actually.
Absolutely. There should be guidance, but not in that format. I think that was, you know, mea culpa on that one. That shouldn't happen again, and that will be addressed in the coming months. Any other points before we close the meeting?
Whoever is Police and Crime Commissioner after May still will have the responsibility for holding the police and crime, for holding the Chief Constable to account. So, you know, we're not going to let up on the new Police and Crime Commissioner, or if it's the same one. These responsibilities still lie with the role, not with the person. So we will be holding them to account just as we would have done whoever it was.
I would like to think that be taken as read, but thank you very much for raising it. And that, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to close the meeting. The live stream will cease. Good luck if you're standing for re-election. And either way, have a safe journey home. Thank you.